Hi, I'm Gail Bannock.
And I'm Ilana Santone. Welcome to the She Means Business podcast. Throughout our careers, we faced countless questions and sought advice from other women we respect and admire. And that's exactly what this show is about.
Each week, we aim to help you achieve your goals by sharing our experiences and talking with successful leaders, offering real stories, practical advice, and actionable takeaways for women who mean business. All right, let's do this. Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of She Means Business. I am so excited to introduce today's guest, Jennifer Ho. With over 2 decades of experience, Jen has carved a career leading large-scale digital transformations at organizations such as Microsoft, Rogers, Shaw, Indigo, and she is currently serving as the Vice President of Product Management at OLG. I've seen firsthand, having worked with her, Jen lead her team with kindness and compassion, especially through some very difficult times, and I've been so impressed with her leadership and professionalism. Welcome to the show, Jen. It's so great to have you.
Thank you, Gail. Nice to see you, Ilana.
Nice to see you too, Jen.
Can you please walk us through how you got started and your journey and how you got to where you are today?
It started with me going to business school, Wilfrid Laurier.
Yay, go Laurier!
I see your degree back there. Yes, the Laurier girls. So I took business school at Laurier and focused on marketing. So when my first job came around, it was for a commercial real estate company. And as time passed, you realize that all marketing has a digital element to it. Then I went back to school, and after I graduated, it was during the recession, and it took a while to get a job, and I finally landed one at Microsoft. And again, the role was in marketing, but there was a huge element of digital that I was really missing. So there was one piece of my job at Microsoft, which was creating this application called Pinpoint, and it was connecting Microsoft businesses with consumers. And so it was like the yellow pages of Microsoft in a way. And I absolutely love that element of my job, even though it was a slim part of it. So I really wanted to find a career in digital and start that path. And so then finally found a role at Rogers. And what was great was moving over to Rogers. It was a Canadian headquartered company. The experience at Microsoft was so incredible. I was working with a lot of intelligent people, learned from, the best of the best. But one of the things that Microsoft didn't give me was the strategic element and be part of a headquarters where strategy comes out of. In Microsoft Canada, you're only a subsidiary, so you're executing a strategy that's been created in the United States. So moving over to Rogers was a great opportunity because a lot of the strategy came out of there. And the role at Rogers was entirely digital. And so that was a start of my digital career. The first redesign, moving to a modern CMS, doing a replatform. And then over time, it was, okay, the next company has an opportunity to do a digital transformation. And I joke with Gail about it, that I'm probably going to do a digital transformation until I retire because innovation just doesn't stop in this space. And once you're able to replatform or redesign something, there's always new technology around the corner.
You must enjoy that, though, the building of you're addicted to it at this point, I'm sure, because the energy that goes into a retransformation.
Yeah, it's always new. So I think what's great about it is you're always trying to solve a customer problem.
It's interesting because we're both in the digital field, and I often hear about digital as like tech. And then I think of digital as more as business, liaison between business and tech. But really, digital is kind of that bridge between tech and the business in almost every way. And I think that notion of marketing too, as, marketing really is the website or social or any of those things are digital, but they really are a form of marketing to the consumer, right?
So Jen, you are a woman in an industry that has typically been male dominated. How do you think your experience has been different working in this field, and especially over the last 20 years, with your perspective as a woman?
It's a good question. I would say that from the beginning of my career to more recently, I have seen the shift in more women going into technology and digital. At the very beginning, there was a smaller ratio for sure. It wasn't top of mind that I was a woman and therefore I was different. The approach was, I am capable of doing the job. I am just as qualified as anyone else. And it was more the confidence of going into it. So I tried to show up as that, not that I was anything different. I would say more recently, I've seen some behaviors at a leadership level where I really felt like myself being the only woman at a leadership level really stood out. When I wasn't at a leadership level, there was more diversity. But the more you move up the ladder, I think that there's less diversity. So at a leadership level, there was a scenario where I was the only woman leader in the room. I would say, one of my qualities that I'm really good at is I can build strategic decks that look nice, look very good. And it's known amongst my peers and I'm really good at it. And so I was in a leadership conversation. It was all male leaders and I was the only woman in the room. And there was an expectation that we would build this deck to be brought to an ELT presentation or a board presentation. And so the leader in the room turned to me and said, Jen, you're going to build it, right? For all of us. And that was probably one of the moments where I truly felt like, I don't want to say discrimination, but I wasn't treated fairly in that situation. Why did they turn to the female? Yeah. To ask them to build the deck for everyone else in the room. Everyone is capable of building their own decks. So I walked away from that conversation, had a conversation with my leader on the side and said that everyone is capable of building their own. And I will give feedback at the end on if their slides need to be tweaked. And that was the approach, but I wasn't going to do it for them. I would give feedback on how it could be more strategic.
You bring up a couple of points that I want to emphasize. The first one about your approach, you didn't think of yourself as a woman. And I think that's something, we don't think of ourselves as different or women or less than or whatever. I don't think of myself as a woman first. I just am who I am and I do my best. And I think that's exactly your perspective of like, you have every right to be there. You're smart, you're educated, you're experienced. And so what's the problem? So I think that's the first thing that jumped out to me. And then the second with your story, first I want to commend you because I think a lot of people would just do it and say, oh, okay, my supervisor asked me to do something and I'm going to do it. So I would love to hear more about what it was that made you say, no, this isn't right. This isn't fair. I'm not going to do it. And the conversation that you had, because I think it took a lot of strength to say no philosophically and then actually to push back and say no. And also very smart to provide an alternative solution of like, I will review it. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think your first part about not thinking that you're a woman, it is all about perception and how you walk into the room and just your demeanor in every single situation. It's how do you show up to an interview? How do you show up when you meet someone for the first time? How do you show up when you're doing a presentation? And your perception of yourself or your confidence plays such a big part of it. And I would just encourage everyone to see themselves as equal to everyone else. You have a seat at the table, so therefore take your seat and bring what you have. And so if someone else perceives you differently, it's on them. And so I agree with you completely that I didn't realize until someone pointed it out that I was different at the table. In terms of the courage to address that situation, I think there were multiple moments leading up to it, so it didn't come out of nowhere. And so when it finally happened, it was in a room with all of my peers who are my equals. I highly respected all of them, everyone at the table. And what really, pushed me over the edge was that the subject matter of the presentation was not my expertise. And that is what, pushed me over, because had it been my expertise, of course, I'm going to build a strategic deck for my manager so that they can bring it to the board. But it wasn't my subject matter that I was an expert in. But for me to then be the deck builder of someone else's expertise, that didn't make sense. So it was so obvious that situation was wrong. I didn't say much in the meeting. I just shook my head and I said, no, I don't think I'm going to be doing that. And then the meeting ended and I had the conversation separately with my manager. And I explained my perspective, which was, I'm literally just taking someone else's words and making it look better in a presentation. And I don't think that's fair. Instead, what I'm good at is looking at a full picture, looking at the big picture, bringing a storyline to it, putting strategy to it. And I will give feedback on that journey for my peers, but I won't be the one putting it together. And that person took it really well, actually. It was a great conversation and there was no hard feelings after.
Do you think you'd approach that meeting differently, having experienced it this way the first time? Like, or would you address it the same way, or is there something you'd do differently about that situation based on your learnings?
I don't think I would do anything differently. I actually was proud of myself after it. I would do it the exact same way. The other thing that I did was that I called my peers after as well and told them the same thing. And they were like, of course, we wouldn't expect you to. And so I think it was a learning opportunity for them. I hope that they took that experience away and would never put someone else in that position, whether it's a team member or a peer.
Let me ask you this way, because I can see a scenario where it could have gone a little differently, where somebody in your shoes could have said, wow, they really are so impressed with my ability to build good presentations. And this is not even my area of expertise. And I'm being asked to do this work and have the opportunity to showcase my abilities. Like, wow, great. Mm-hmm. Like, that's a different way for somebody to take it. Not better or worse, but I'm curious because I feel like even I myself could have fallen into that trap of saying, oh my God, they recognize me.
Absolutely.
And this is a great opportunity, not seeing that I'm actually being used, for lack of a better word.
Absolutely. And I think that if someone feels that way, they should absolutely build that wonderful deck and allow their skills to shine. They should absolutely do it. And I have done it so many times in my career. I think it was the context leading up to it. It's how I felt in that situation. However, other people in that situation may not have similar context. Maybe it was truly this person is really skilled at it. We want to see her skill set come through, and absolutely take that on. I think that building strategic presentations and articulating thoughts in a strategic way to influence a group of people is an excellent skill to nurture and to be able to leverage and repeat.
Let's just build on this a little bit. I mean, you are a little bit of a unicorn in terms of, you're both female and obviously a visible minority coming up in a field where potentially, we've talked about being less female. And then also, I'm actually not sure of the context of the visible minority. Has that played a role in your career, or how you've progressed in your career, or how you've approached your career?
I would say that I am a very small group of lucky individuals where being a visible minority did not impact my chances of getting a job. It did not slow down my career progression. I did not ever feel discriminated against because of my race. Sometimes I wonder why is it that way? Why did others have that experience and not me? Is it because I don't have an accent? Is it because of how I dress? Is it because of my attitude and my approach? Is it because I'm confident? Could that be it? There's so many reasons on why I may not have experienced it when so many others have. I don't know why. I think that a big part of it was probably the relationships that I had and having been lucky to have met incredible leaders and sponsors and mentors along the way that actually helped me elevate in my career. And it was my parents being first generation immigrants, came to Canada with absolutely nothing, chasing the American dream, coming here so that their children could have better lives, get educated and get these big jobs. That's what I experienced in university. And so a lot of my friends or people that I met had their educations paid for. I didn't. They didn't have to have a job. I did. They could afford a lot of things while being in university, including a car. I couldn't. And so that's where I felt the disparity. But what did that teach me when I was in school was working hard, not feeling sorry for myself. And so you kind of have to be really creative with the situation you have. You got to work really hard, maybe work harder in some instances to get to where you are. So I would say my parents' American dream came true. Their kids ended up in good places and they got that work ethic. I think that's what it taught me, the work ethic. And it didn't let me to focus on differences. And maybe that's how I entered into the workforce and started off my career with that mentality, perhaps. And I was lucky in a lot of ways.
Listening to you tell your story, I would exchange the word luck for maybe grit and perseverance and nice. A couple of other
determination.
Determination. I think, I know typically as women, we tend to give a lot of credit to luck, and luck obviously plays a role, but I think having seen you in action, I think there's a lot more to it than just luck. And on that note, I've seen you lead, like I said earlier, through some very difficult situations, and I'm sure you've had others that I wasn't privy to. Can you tell us a little bit about your personal leadership style and how you lead teams? Because I know that that's really important to you.
Yeah, it is very important. I really try to bring the human element into it. Better for worse, I've formed really close relationships with a lot of members within my team. I think the good side of all of it is you build a lot of trust. You build a lot of open communication. You build a environment in which teams can thrive.
So what advice would you give your younger self now 20 years into your career, or 15 to 20 years into your career? What do you say to your younger Jen Ho as she's starting off in her career?
I would say to relax, slow down, do not worry. It sounds so cliche. Don't worry, don't sweat the small stuff, but seriously, do not. I think about all the times where I was so upset when someone gave me constructive feedback and I thought, oh, well, that person didn't know what I was going through and they weren't in my shoes. And I was so upset about it. Now looking back, that was probably the best thing that happened to me, to get that sort of constructive feedback, that someone took time out of their day to have an uncomfortable conversation with you actually will shape your career in a lot of ways and shape you as a person. I remember just working so hard throughout the night and just grinding. But now when I look back, there was a better way of doing it, working smartly instead of hard and aggressively. And then also I think about, every single person has had difficult relationships with people at work, working with that one person that you really just don't like and you don't get along with. And it used to upset me so much. And now when I look back, there was moments that I could have learned from, which was it probably just took, a drink at a bar, or it probably just took a coffee chat with that individual, and it could have been better instead of stressing over it for weeks or months.
It also resolves itself. I find
it does.
Just give it a minute. I've had so many experiences in my career where somebody bothered me and I was like, oh my God, I have to leave. I can't stay here, or I can't work like this. And then if you just take a breath, they get a job, or they get promoted, or something else happens, or a new boss comes in, or you get promoted. Like, it just figures itself out.
And then you look back and it was like, that was such an insignificant moment in your life
totally.
that it just doesn't warrant that type of stress. So I would say slow down. Don't sweat the small
Jen
stuff.
says relax.
And just enjoy the ride.
I think your comment on constructive feedback is so interesting because early on in your career, you have managers who actually will take the time to give constructive feedback. And then I find as you get more senior, actually getting constructive feedback is less and less frequent.
Any feedback.
And so you actually look back and you go, wow, that was such a gift because I actually had stuff I could work on, but it totally resonates with me because I remember getting constructive feedback early in my career and it was like
offensive.
Gutting. It was just like I'd go home and I'd be like,
so gutting.
Oh my God. Like I can't, it was something so small too, right? It was like a nuance, but then those pieces of constructive feedback are the things that actually, steer you in a way that actually makes you a much stronger leader over time and makes you who you are. And I just find as the more senior you get, if you don't ask directly for it, and even if you do, getting that feedback or understanding what you can work on is just such a hard thing to get. So it's such an insightful thing to say, embrace the constructive feedback. Embrace it. It is that cliche of feedback is a gift. It truly is because it's how oftentimes it's not at the core of your values. It's just a style or an approach thing that can change. So, well, this has been great, Jen. It's so wonderful to talk to someone who I can very much relate in a way to your career, but to see the progress that you've had, the deliberate nature of which you've approached your career, the thoughtful leadership and how you approach different situations, all very impressive. So we're so thrilled that you were able to join us today and wish you all the best in your new role and look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jen.
Thank you.
That was really insightful. And I've been saying how every time we do one of these, I take something away personally. And there was actually quite a bit to take away from that one.
At first, I was thinking, I love her talking through her career early on about how it's not a straight line, because I feel like the more, especially younger people who are starting out in their career, the more they hear that it's not a straight line, the better. Because I, at this point, don't know anybody who has a very straight line in their career. Some people do. There are some exceptions, but I think it makes it more interesting if there's weaves and turns and you learn so much, and also takes the pressure off. As we both have young, daughters who are getting into university and who are being required to declare their life's purpose at the, ripe age of 18. And it's a lot of pressure. And I'm sure you come out of university with as much pressure. I know I did, of like, okay, so I guess this is my career because I just invested 3-4 years in this field. And then to come out but then to see in the future, oh yeah, that you're going to have about 4 career changes between what you thought you were going to do to what you're doing now. I think it's funny that you say that. So I'll say 2 things about this one. One is 100%, and it's never been more important to acknowledge that than at this time, because things are changing so rapidly that you can't specialize, and I put that in air quotes, specialize in something and expect to be in that career forever in the same way. And even Jen, the way Jen describes it is she's been in digital, but even being in digital has been a journey of different places, right? You start off outside. Now you're kind of figuring out how to better integrate. And then at some point you might be decentralized completely. And so what is your role as it evolves over time? So I think firstly, we have to embrace that because it's coming. And then the second thing is people often ask me, how did you end up kind of leading digital for Canadian Tire? And I joke, like I graduated from, in late 90s from university. I don't even think this role existed. No.
There may have, and if they did, it was maybe 3 people in North America or in the world that had a head of digital role.
Yeah.
And so this notion that I had a bullseye of like, that's where I want to end up. No, of course not. In fact, I got a benefit of having someone take a chance on me to get into digital very late in my career. It was 7 years ago where I had no digital experience, and someone saw, my leadership experience as an opportunity for me to come in and actually work in this field. So the importance of not that not straight line, which is a theme that continues to kind of come up, is really critical.
And it's very scary. It's very unsettling because it's lovely to have a very clear view of where you want to be in 20 years from now. Everybody asks you, where do you want to be in 5, 10, 15? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know where I'm going to be in 5 years, let alone 10 or 20.
Exactly. And I think one other thing I just want to comment on what Jen talked about, because I thought it's so important, and she expressed it so well, was just how she shows up has a lot to do with how she shows up, right? And how people perceive her showing up. And this notion of, I call it deliberate or conscious decisions of how you show up, how you take a seat at the table, how you articulate when there's an issue that you perceive as not right or appropriate, which I think she also handled beautifully, how she took steps in her career and how she made her decisions, how she knows her strengths. I mean, just the way she talks about, I'm very good at this, and this is the type of role that would really suit me. Those are things that we can all learn from, because being deliberate or very clear in your mind on who you are, what you bring, how you show up, and how you handle adversity or with context address issues as they come up. That is a lesson for all of us in terms of how we conduct our business, whether you're just starting out, middle of your career, or kind of in more senior levels. That is something that we all can take away and really apply.
I agree. And I think it relates to the other point that I took away around feedback. You mentioned how early on in your career, you get more feedback than you do later on in your career. And I think I would add to that sometimes early on in your career, you don't get enough feedback because your managers are not good enough, essentially, to give you good feedback. So when you do get feedback, it really is a gift, because it's so hard to come by good feedback. Yep. But it's this funny thing. I was thinking about it when you were talking, that, when you do get feedback, if it's something really small, you kind of dismiss it because you're like, you're just being nitpicky. Like, the way that I presented that was just fine. Or the way that I delivered that was just like, why are you at me? And if it's really, and so you dismiss it. And then or you might, and then if it's really big, you're gutted. Because, oh my God, like that's who I am. Like you're just attacking me now. It's like no feedback is good enough, because if it's too small, it doesn't matter. And if it's too big, it's too big. And so it's really hard to give feedback, and it's really hard to get feedback. But it's all good, because like you said, it's even the little nitpicky things. Like if I think about all of the feedback that I've received over the years, whether somebody gave it to me or I saw it myself because I saw myself presenting, it has chipped away at making me a better presenter. Yeah. And I needed it little bits. And sometimes I needed to hear it again and again in order to really get the point. So I feel like this is a topic all in and of itself, but it kind of opened my eyes around this idea of big feedback and small feedback and how to take it.
Yeah. No, I agree. Lots to take away from that. I mean, I've made the feedback comment is just it's so important. What you just said is extremely important. And I think as leaders as well, we just have to think about how we give it in a way that, having said all of that, then how do we become leaders that provide the feedback to and coaching to our teams the way we would want to have had it early on. Yeah. So great conversation, and we'll look forward to the next topic.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of She Means Business. If you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you listen to podcasts, and head over to our show notes where you can find helpful links and summaries of key points from the episode. We'd also love to hear from you on LinkedIn or Instagram, so please follow and DM us at the She Means Business podcast. See you next time.